Greetings class, I hope I find you well. In today's lesson, we are going to focus on bearing questions. This is day number 4, but I find it worthy to dedicate this lesson for bearing questions, right? So we need to understand what to call parallel lines theorems. We have theorems which are confined to parallel lines. The first theorem that we have under parallel lines is the theorem of allied angles, which are also known as co-interior angles. What are allied angles? What are co-interior angles? Right, allied angles are formed, right, when two parallel lines are cut by a transversal line. Angle at A and angle at B. At A we have got x degrees, at B we have got y degrees. But these two angles are above this line, which is cutting these two parallel lines. The line which cut the two parallel lines is known as the transversal line. Above the transversal line, allied angles are formed. So allied angles are on the same side, and their total or their sum is 180 degrees. So if you take this x and add this x with y, the sum that you get is 180 degrees. Right, let us look at the following examples. Part A. We are given 140 and the question is instructing you to find angle at A. So you can notice that this line is cutting two parallel lines and this line is referred to as the transversal line. Then on the right side of the transversal line, we have got 140 and A, which are on the same side. Such angles are referred to as allied angles or co-interior angles. They add up to 180. So to find A, I am going to less 180 with 140. We get 40 degrees. A is equals to 40 degrees. I hope you are following. We move on to example B. Find X. X and 30 degrees are angles under this transversal line. They are on the same side. They add up to 180. So to find X, you say 180 minus 30 degrees, and your answer is 150 degrees. I hope you are listening. Then we move on to part C. Part C is a parallelogram. It is a shape with 4 sides. Two or opposite sides, they move in the same direction. Right. We are being required to find A and B. So I'm going to start with A. You can notice that 20 and A are allied angles. They add up to 180. So to find A, you simply deduct this 20 from 180. You get 160 degrees. So A is 160 degrees. I hope you are following. Then B and 20 are allied angles being formed by these parallel lines with one arrow. It simply means 180 minus 20, you get B. B is also 160. And another thing that you need to understand about parallelogram is opposite angles are equal. If you have got 160 here, this is 160. If this is 20, this opposite angle is also 20 degrees. So this is the first theorem under parallel lines of allied angles. I want you to stay tuned as we move on to the second theorem. Right, we are now on second theorem of parallel lines. This theorem is referred to as alternate angles, or we can just call them Z angles, right? Unlike allied angles, Z angles are not on the same side, right? You can notice that this point or this angle A and this angle A below, they are not on the same side as with allied angles. So for alternate angles, they are formed when two parallel lines are cut with the transversal line, but they are not on the same side. Alternate angles are equal, or Z angles are equal. So if you have 40 degrees here it simply means that this angle is also 40. Let us move on to part A. The examiner is requiring you to find angle A. You can notice that A and 25 are Z angles. Therefore, A is equals to 25 because Z angles are equal. If we move at part B, 120 is an alternate angle with X. So X is also 120. Then if we move to example C, you are being required to find Y. Y is an alternate angle with the 50. Therefore, Y is equals to 50. So alternate angles, they form a Z letter. Right, we are now moving on to the third theorem of parallel lines, and this theorem is in line with corresponding angles. These are angles which follow the same pattern or sequence. Right, they use the transversal line. They are generated from the transversal line as their foundation, right? But if this angle is 30 and you are being required to find A and B, you can notice that the position of 30 is the position of A, which is also the position of B. So A is equals to 30, B is equals to 30. Why? Because A and B is following the same pattern or the same sequence with 30 degrees. We refer to them as F angles. This letter being formed is in shape of F letter, so we nickname them F angles, but they are also referred to as corresponding angles. We move on to part A. You are being required to find angle A and angle B. You can notice that 30 degrees and A are following the same pattern and sequence. Therefore, A is equals to 30. Then to find B, you can notice that 40 degrees and B are following the same pattern or sequence. It simply means B is equals to 40 degrees. We move on to part B. Find X and Y. Y and 20 are following the same pattern or the same sequence. So Y is equals to 20 degrees. X is following the same pattern with the 70. Therefore, X is equals to 70 degrees. We refer to them as F angles or corresponding angles. I hope you are following. Right. Then another theorem which is required in solving bearing questions is the theorem of complete revolution. Angles which form a circle, they complete a revolution. So if you add those angles, you find a total of 360 degrees. So A plus B plus C, you get 360. Let's say you've got a known angle like 30 here. Then this is 140. And you are being required to find angle X. What you do is you add 140 with the 30 first. 140 plus 30, you get 170 degrees. So to find X, you need to understand that 30 plus 140 plus X, they complete a revolution. So it's 360 minus 170. 16 minus 7, you get 9. Get 1. Then 3 minus 2, you get 1. So your final answer for X is 190 using complete revolution. Then you also need to understand that sum of angles on a given straight line, they add up to 180. We have 130 here. You are being required to find X. So to find X, you simply say 180 minus 130, you get 50. Because sum of angles on a given straight line, they add up to 180. Right, so now that you are equipped with the theorem of parallel lines and other useful information, let us jump into bearing. Right, so this is three-figure bearing. North is at the top, south is at the bottom, then your east is on the right side, your west is on the left side. For three-figure bearing, an angle is measured from the North Pole using a clockwise direction. So at the North Pole, you have 0 degrees, you have 90 degrees on the east, 180 on the south, 270 degrees on the west. If you go back to the North Pole, you complete a revolution with 360. I hope you are following class, right? So the point of intersection between the North Pole and the Eastern Pole, a 90-degree angle is formed. I hope you are following. The point of intersection between the Southern Pole and the Eastern Pole, a 90 degrees is formed again. So you have 90 degrees at each and every point of intersection between one pole and another pole. Right. Let's say you want to measure 0 at 0 degrees on the compass. You draw an arrow from the North Pole of your compass, then you move in a clockwise direction. Something like this. So your arrow must land between 0 and 90 degrees. I hope you are following. Because 80 degree is an angle which is between 0 and 90 degrees. Then after that, you draw a line from the center of the compass, touching this arrow. This is the position of 80 degrees. So this is how you measure 80 degrees. Right. Let me teach you how to sketch bearings on a diagram before we move on to questions. Right, the first sketch is the bearing of X from Y is 130 degrees. Right, the first thing to do is you identify the starting point. Right, so you need to understand the language X from Y. X from Y, it simply means that you are coming from Y heading towards X. So X from Y is good as Y to X. Right, so what you need to do is you draw your compass with the 4 cardinal points and you just label north, since we measure our angle from the North Pole. So we have 0 degrees at the North Pole, 90 degrees here, this is 180, this is 270, and this is 360 degrees. Right, what is the importance of labeling 0, 90, 180, 270, 360? It helps you to identify the position of 130. So 130 is an angle which is greater than 90 but less than 180. It simply means that when drawing your arrow from this North Pole, you move in a clockwise direction, but the arrow must land between 90 and 180 where 130 degrees is located. I hope you are following. So after drawing the arrow, at the center of this compass, you need to put the starting point. Likewise, X from Y, it simply means Y to X. So we are coming from Y, moving towards X. So Y is going to occupy the center of the compass as the starting point. Then you draw a straight line which is going to act as a tangent with this arrow. At the end point of this line, this is where point X lies. Then inside this arc, you put 130 degrees, something like this. So this is how you sketch your diagram. Then you are also allowed to put a North Pole on X. Let us move on to example number 2. Right, example number 2, it reads, the bearing of P from Q is 322 degrees. Sketch a diagram to show the position of P and Q. So to sketch a diagram, you start by the compass. So the compass is going to have 4 cardinal points. This is your north, this is east, south, and west. So there's no need for you to label east, south, and west. You just label the north, where north is representing the 0 degrees. North, it represents 0 degrees. Right, then this is 90, this is 180, 270, and this is 360. Right. Where is 322 degrees? 322 degrees is an angle which is greater than 270, but less than 360. So it means our arrow is going to land in the 4th quadrant. So I'm going to measure 322 degrees from the North Pole, but when measuring this angle, you measure it using a clockwise direction. So this is the clockwise direction, right? But you make sure that your arrow is going to land between 270 and 360. I hope you are following class. Right, after drawing the arrow, you then need to identify the letter which is going to occupy the center of the compass. That letter is your starting point. So if you read clearly, it is saying P from Q. P from Q, it means you are coming from Q, heading towards P. So Q is your starting point. Hence, the center of the compass is going to be occupied by letter Q. I hope you are following. Right, after identifying the letter occupying the center, you draw a line from this center, and that line is going to act as a tangent to this arrow. I hope you are following. At the end of this line, this is where point P lies, and on P you just need to put a north pole, something like this. Then you are home and dry. So this arrow from the North Pole up to this point is representing 322 degrees. Right, now that you now know how to sketch the angle, we can move to questions. So I want you to stay tuned as we attack our first question. Right, here comes the first question. It reads, the bearing of A from B is 080 degrees. Find the bearing of B from A. Right, so you start by sketching the points A and B before you find the bearing of B from A. So we are going to sketch using the first sentence from the word the, right, up to 080 degrees. Those words are going to give you the diagram that is going to help you to then find the bearing of B from A. Right, you start by drawing a compass. Remember, a compass, you've got 4 cardinal points. Then you label north here. This is 0, this is 90 degrees, this is 180, 270, and 360. Right, so where is 80 degrees? 80 degrees is between 0 and 90 degrees. So I'm going to measure 80 degrees from this North Pole using a clockwise direction, but my arrow is going to land in the first quadrant. It is not going to exceed 90 degrees because 80 degrees is less than 90. So after drawing this arrow, we now need to identify the letter which is going to occupy the center of this compass. It reads A from B, meaning we are coming from B heading towards A. So B is our starting point. So at this center of this compass, we are going to put letter B. Then you draw a line from B, which is going to act as a tangent with this arrow. At the end point of this line, you label A. Then you put a North Pole on A, something like this. Right. Do not forget to label 80 degrees inside this arc. We move on to the second sentence. Find the bearing of B from A. So the second sentence, we move to the second sentence after drawing or after sketching the diagram using the first sentence. Right, here comes the question. Find the bearing of B from A. So what is B from A? B from A simply means A to B. B from A means A to B. So I'm going to touch the North Pole of A. Then I move in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting A and B. So this is the required angle in blue. I hope you are following, class. So how do you find this angle? You then need to apply the theorems that I have introduced at the start of this lesson, the theorem of parallel lines. If we have a transversal line, angles above that transversal line, which are x and y, they add up to 180. They are referred to as allied angles or co-interior angles. So if you look carefully here, you can notice that this line from B to A is acting as a transversal line. The North Pole of A and the North Pole of B are parallel lines. So 80 degrees and this angle above, they are allied angles, they add up to 180. So 180 minus 80 degrees, you get 100. I'm going to write 100 degrees inside this arc. But 100 degrees is not our final answer. So to then find our final answer, we can apply complete revolution. This required bearing in blue and 100, they add up to 360 since they form a circle. So the required bearing is now 360 minus 100, which is equals to 260 degrees. And this is your final answer. I hope you are following, class. I want you to stay tuned as we move on to question number 2. Right, we are now moving on to question number 2. It reads, the bearing of P from Q is 108 degrees. Find the bearing of Q from P. Right, so before you attack Q from P, you need to sketch P from Q first. Right, so how do you sketch P from Q? You draw a compass with the 4 cardinal points, where north is your starting point. So on North Pole, you put 0. On the east, there is 90 degrees. This is 180. This is 270. And this is 360 degrees. Right, so labeling 0, 90, 180, 270, 360 is very, very important because it helps you to identify the quadrant containing 108 degrees. Right, so where is 108? 108 is an angle which is greater than 90 but less than 180 degrees. So 108 is found in the second quadrant. So I'm going to measure 108 using an arrow. Remember, our starting point is the North Pole. So I'm going to measure from the North Pole. Then we move in a clockwise direction. Our arrow is going to land between 90 and 180, where 108 is located. Right, so stage 1 is drawing of the arrow. After drawing the arrow, we need to identify the letter which is going to occupy the center of the compass. P from Q, it means we are coming from Q, heading towards P. So Q is your starting point. So at the center of this compass, I'm going to label Q. Right. After labeling Q, you draw a straight line from Q, and this line is going to act as a tangent to this arrow. Something like this. At the end point of this line, this is where point P lies. Then you put a North Pole on that end point. So this arc is containing 108 degrees. Right. After labeling, you then move on to the second sentence. Find the bearing of Q from P. Q from P means P to Q. So I'm going to measure this angle from the north pole of P, moving in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting P and Q. This is the required angle. Right. So how do you find this angle? To find this angle, you need to calculate this smaller angle first, which is above P. This smaller angle first, we need to calculate it. Right. 180 degrees and this smaller angle are allied angles. Why? Because this line from Q to P is acting as a transversal line. Remember, angles which are above the transversal line are referred to as the co-interior angles or allied angles. So what I'm trying to say is Q to P is our transversal line. The north pole of P and the north pole of Q are parallel lines, and the angles which are above PQ line are allied angles. So to find this smaller angle above P, you less 108 from 180. So 180 minus 108, what do you get? You get 72. I hope you are following. So I'm going to write 72 inside this smaller angle. Right, but 72 is not your final answer. Your answer is measuring from this north pole up to this point. To find this angle, you complete a revolution with 360. So it's now 360 minus 72 degrees. 10 minus 2, you get 8. Get 1. 16 minus 8, you get 8. Get 1. 3 minus 1, you get 2. So your final answer is 288 degrees. I hope you are following. Right, I want you to stay tuned as we move on to question number 3. Right, we are now on question number 3. It reads, the bearing of M from N is 205 degrees. Find the bearing of N from M. Right, so I'm going to make use of the first sentence from this point up to this point to sketch the points M and N on the diagram. After that, we then attack the question. Right, so to sketch, you start with a compass. Remember, a compass has got 4 cardinal points. This is 0, this is 90, this is 180, this is 270, and this is 360 degrees. Right, so where is the position of 205? Which quadrant is containing 205? 205 is greater than 180, but it is less than 270. So 205 is located in the third quadrant. So remember, when measuring 3-figure bearing, you start from the north pole, right? Then you move in a clockwise direction. Our arrow is going to land in the third quadrant, which is between 180 and 270, where 205 is located. So the first thing to do when sketching, you sketch your compass, you label it. Then the next stage is drawing the arrow. Then the arrow is going to land in the third quadrant. I hope you are following. Right, we now need to identify the letter which is going to occupy the center of the compass. So M from N, it means we are coming from N heading towards M. So our starting point is N. I'm going to put N at the center of the compass. I hope you are following, class. You are going to draw a line from N which acts as a tangent with this arrow. At the end point of this line, this is where point M lies. I hope you are following. You put a north pole on M. Then this arc from this north pole up to this arrow is representing 205 degrees. So I'm going to label 205 degrees. I hope you are following class. Right, let us move on to the question. Find the bearing of N from M. N from M, it means you are coming from M heading towards N. So we are going to measure this angle from the north pole of M. Then we move in a clockwise direction. So this is the north pole of M, right? So we are going to move in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting M and N. Let the angle be represented by theta. This is the required bearing, right? So how do you find this bearing? To find this bearing, we need to start by calculating the angle on top of N, this angle. We can calculate it using complete revolution. So I'm going to less 205 from 360 to find this angle. 0 minus 5, it can't. You put 1, then you get 1. 10 minus 5, you get 5. 6 minus 1, you get 5. 3 minus 2, you get 1. So this angle is representing 155 degrees using complete revolution. 155 and theta are allied angles which are above the transversal line MN. Theta and 155, they add up to 180. So to find the theta, you say 180 less 155. 10 minus 5, you get 5. 8 minus 6, you get 2. 1 minus 1 is 0. So for three-figure bearing, you don't give your answer as 25. If your answer is 2 digits, you put a 0 so that it becomes a three-figure answer. If you present your answer as 25 degrees, you are going to be marked wrong because three-figure bearing must have 3 digits. So if your answer or your angle is 25, you support 25 with a 0 so that it becomes a three-figure bearing answer. I hope you are following. Stay tuned as we move on to question number 4. Right, question number 4 reads, the bearing of T from S is 306 degrees. Find the bearing of S from T, 3 marks. Right, so I'm going to draw my compass as usual. Label North Pole. Right, so on the North Pole you've got 0. This is 90. This is 180. 270. And 360. Right, let us identify the quadrant which is going to contain 306. 306 is greater than 270, but it is less than 360. So 306 is going to be found in the 4th quadrant. I'm going to measure this angle from the North Pole, moving in a clockwise direction. Then the arrow is going to land between 270 and 360. I hope you are following. Right, after drawing the arrow, we now need to identify the letter which is going to occupy the center of the compass. So T from S, it means S to T. So letter S is going to occupy the center of the compass since S is our starting point. Then you draw a line from S which is going to act as a tangent to this arrow. At the end point of this line, this is where point T lies. Then you put a North Pole on that T. So this arc from this point up to the arrow is representing the given bearing 306 degrees. Right, after sketching the diagram, you now move on to the question. Find the bearing of S from T. Find the bearing of S from T. S from T means T to S. So let us measure the angle. This is the North Pole of T. We are going to move in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting T and S. and let us represent the required bearing by theta. So if you find this theta, you are going to be given 3 marks. So how do you find the theta? To find the theta, you need to calculate the angle above S first, this smaller angle that I have placed a black spot. This smaller angle and 306, they complete revolution. So 360 less 306. 0 minus 6, it can't. You put 1, then you get 1. So 10 minus 6, you get 4. 6 minus 1, you get 5. So this angle is 54. Then 54 and this required angle theta are allied angles which are on the same side above the transversal line TS. They add up to 180. So to find the theta, I'm going to less 54 from 180. 10 minus 4, you get 6. 8 minus 6, you get 2. 1 minus 0, you get 1. So your final answer is 126, which is the required bearing. On 126, you don't put a 0 since 126 has 3 digits already. You only put a 0 if your answer has 2 digits. Like the one we did on question number 3, our answer was 25. So you support 25 with a 0 so that you present it in 3 figure. Stay tuned as we move on to question number 5. Right, so we are now on question number 5. It is the bearing of P from Q is 070 degrees. R is due east of P. Find the bearing of Q from P, 3 marks, right? So like always, you start by the compass, you label it 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. Right, 70 degrees is an acute angle which is between 0 and 90. I'm going to measure 70 degrees from this north pole, then I move in a clockwise direction. The arrow is going to land between 0 and 90 degrees where 70 degrees lies. Then after that, I need to identify the letter which is going to occupy this center of the compass. P from Q, it simply means that we are coming from Q, moving in a clockwise direction towards P. So Q is our starting point. I'm going to place Q at the center of the compass. Then you draw a line from Q, which is going to act as a tangent to the arrow. At the end point of this line, this is where point P lies. I hope you are following. But inside this arc, you put 70. We move on to the second sentence. R, which is another point, is due east of P. So whenever you see the word due east, it simply means R is sitting on the eastern pole of P. So if we put our cardinal points, remember this is our north, this is our west, south, east is on the right side. So they are saying R is sitting on the eastern pole of P. It simply means that you need to extend this eastern pole of P. Then on this eastern pole of P, this is where point R lies. Then the intersection of the northern pole of P and the eastern pole, a 90-degree angle is formed. So whenever you see this word due east, it means there is a 90 degree. It also means that R is sitting on the eastern pole of P. Something like this. I hope you are following. Then you connect Q and R to form a triangle, which is QPR. So this is how you sketch the 3 points. Let us move on to part A of the question. Find the bearing of Q from P. Q from P simply means P to Q. So I'm going to identify the north pole of P first. This is the north pole of P. We are going to move in a clockwise direction. to touch the line connecting P and Q. Let us represent this angle or this bearing with theta. I hope you are following. How do you calculate that bearing? To calculate the bearing, you first of all calculate this angle, this outer angle above P. This outer angle above P and 70 degrees are allied angles which are above the transversal line QP. They add up to 180. So to find this angle, you say 180 minus 70. This angle is 110 degrees. I hope you are following, class. So this required bearing from the north pole of P up to this line connecting P and Q is going to be found using complete revolution theory. 110 degrees and the required bearing, they form a circle, they complete a revolution. So the required bearing is equals to 360 less 110. 0 minus 0, you get 0. 6 minus 1, you get 5. 3 minus 1, you get 2. So your answer for part A is 250 degrees. I hope you are following. Then we move on to part B. Find angle QPR. Where is QPR? This is Q, this is P, and this is R. So they want you to calculate the angle which is covering from this point up to this point. The angle inside the triangle covering from this point up to this point. So since you now have an understanding that the north pole of P and the eastern pole of P, they form a 90-degree angle, we now know that 250 is the bearing covering from the north pole up to this point. So we simply need to deduct 90 degrees from 250 so that you'll be left with the inner angle inside the triangle which represent QPR. I hope you are following, class. So 250 less 90 degrees. 0 minus 0, you get 0. 5 minus 9, it can't. You put 1, get 1. 15 minus 9, you get 6. 2 minus 1, you get 1. So this inner angle becomes 160. So 160 is your answer for part B. This is how you do it. Right, so we now want to touch question number 20, which was extracted from June 2017, paper 1. And this question is similar to this question number 5. I want you to stay tuned. Right, we are now on question number 20. This is in line with the topic of bearing. It reads, 3 schools A, B, and C are situated such that B is 9 kilometers from A on a bearing of 060 degrees. 060 is an indication that this is a 3-figure bearing being mentioned, and the 3-figure bearing is measured from the north pole using a clockwise direction. And C is 8 kilometers due east of B. Find the 3-figure bearing of A from B. Right, so you need to start by sketching a diagram before you can answer the questions. You sketch the diagram, you represent the schools A, B, and C on the diagram. After representing or sketching the diagram, you then attempt the questions. So, sketching of bearings is start with a compass, and the compass has 4 cardinal points: the north pole, the eastern pole, the western pole, as well as the south pole. So since this is 3-figure bearing, it is measured from the north pole using a clockwise direction. So on the north pole, we have got 0 degrees, eastern pole is 90 degrees, southern pole 180, then west is being represented by 270 degrees and 360 degrees. If you go back to the north pole, you have 360 degrees, something like this, right? So we need to identify the starting point. B is 9 kilometers from A. It means B from A, B from A, it simply means A to B. So A is our starting point. The starting point is placed at the heart of the compass. This is the position of A. Right. So I now want to measure 60 degrees. Right. 60 degrees is in this first quadrant. Why? Because 60 degrees is an acute angle which is between 0 and 90 degrees. So what you do is you measure 60 degrees from this North Pole using a clockwise direction. Then you put an arrow between 0 and 90. I want you to notice something. The arrow must not exceed 90, but the arrow must be placed between 0 and 90 where 60 degrees lies. After that, you draw a line from A, touching this arrow, and at the end point of this line, this is where point B lies. Remember, it's B from A, so A to B. So I'm going to put 60 degrees here. I hope you are following. Then we are also given that the distance from A to B is 9 kilometers. So I'm going to write 9 kilometers as the length from A to B. I hope you are following. We move on to the second part. C is 8 kilometers due east of B. So I'm going to put another compass here. Remember, this is our north, this is our east, south, and this is our west. So if you see the word due east of B, it simply means that C is sitting on the eastern pole of B, and the eastern pole of B, they are referring to this pole, right? So you extend this pole. On this pole, this is where point C lies. So if you hear that C is due east of B, it simply means that on the eastern pole of this B, this is where point C lies. I hope you are following. And you also need to understand that the eastern pole and the north pole, they form 90 degrees. I hope you are following. I'm going to write 8 kilometers, which is covering from B to C, and C is sitting on the eastern pole of B. Right. Now that I have highlighted all the three schools on a sketch, you are supposed also to connect A and C so that you form a triangle, something like that. Right. Then let us move on to the first part of the question. Find the three-figure bearing of A from B. So A from B, it means B to A. So we are going to measure the angle from the north pole of B and move in a clockwise direction. So this is the north pole of B. This is the north pole of B. I'm going to move in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting B and A. So this angle that I've marked in blue is the required bearing. Right, so how do you calculate this angle? To calculate this angle, you need to be aware of parallel lines concept or theorems in line with parallel lines. There is a theorem where you have two lines moving in the same direction, and this line which is cutting the two lines is known as the transversal line. Angle is created here and another angle is created here. You can notice that these angles are on the same side. They are known as allied angles. If you have a transversal line cutting two parallel lines, the angles on the same side, we refer to them as allied angles or co-interior angles. Such angles, they give a sum of 180 degrees if they are added together. I hope you are following. Then another theorem which is very, very crucial on this topic of bearing is the theorem of complete revolution. A, B, and C are on this same point, and they are representing angles which are forming a circle line. If you add A, B, and C, you get a sum which is 360 degrees complete revolution. Right. So to find this required angle, which is from B up to the line connecting B and A, you need to find the angle above B first. So you can notice that from this theorem of allied angles, this angle is likened to Y, and this 60 degrees is likened to X. If X plus Y is equals to 180, it simply means that 60 degrees and this angle, they are on the same side above the transversal line, which is AB. They are allied angles and they add up to 180. So 180 minus 60, you get 120. This angle is 120. Then to find the required bearing, you complete revolution. Use complete revolution. 360 minus 120, you get 240. So this angle is 240. Our bearing answer for the first part of the question is 240 degrees. I hope you are getting it, class. Then we move on to part B of the question. Calculate the distance from A to C, leaving your answer in set form. You now understand that set form is a root form, right? So we want to calculate the distance from A to C. So remember, the angle from this North Pole up to this is the bearing calculated as 240. But I told you before that the North Pole of B and the Eastern Pole of B, they form 90 degrees at their point of intersection. So we need to find the inner angle at B. You say 240 less this 90, 0 here, 14 minus 9, you get 5, 2 minus 1, you get 1. So this inner angle here is 150. It will help you to find the length of AC using cosine rule. So let me teach you how to apply cosine rule. According to cosine rule, to find length using cosine rule, let's say this is A, this is B, and this is C. You've got 10 kilometers, 9 kilometers, and this is 120. And the question is requiring you to find the length AC. What you do is you write AC is equals to, then you put a root sign. Then these two sides, which are 10 and 9, you raise them with power 2, then you add them together. So you get 10 squared plus 9 squared. Put minus 2. This minus 2 is fixed. Then you write 10, you write 9. Then you write cos of the angle opposite to the required side AC. This is the pattern that is used always when you want to find a side using cosine rule. Let's say you have got a triangle like this. This is 100 meters. This is 150 meters. This is 30 degrees. This is X and this is Y. And the examiner wants you to calculate the length of XY. What you do is you write XY, then you put a root sign. You take 100 times 100 squared plus 150 squared. These two sides, 100 squared plus 150 squared. Then you put a negative 2, which is fixed. So this negative 2 is going to appear for each and every question. After that, you put an open bracket, you put 100, then you put 150, then you write cos 30. I hope you are following. Right. So you need to understand this pattern in order to attack cosine rule. Right. So if you look at our question carefully, remember the bearing in part A was covering from this North Pole up to this line connecting B and A. So 240 minus this 90, you get 150, where 150 is the angle inside the triangle, and this angle is representing angle ABC. So in simple terms, we have a shape like this. This is A, this is B, and this is C. You now have 150. Don't use 240. Then you have 9 kilometers there. You have 8 kilometers there. And C is sitting on the eastern pole of this B. The examiner is requiring you to find the distance A to C. You write AC first. After writing AC, you put a root sign. You take this 9, raise it by power 2. Take this 8, raise it by power 2. Then you put this minus 2, which is fixed. Open bracket 9. Close bracket, open bracket 8. Then you write cos 150. I hope you are following class. Right. After that, 9 squared, it gives you 81. 8 squared, it gives you 64. Then 9 times the 8, you get 72. 72 times 2. 2 times 2, you get 4. 2 times 7, you get 14. So you write minus 144. Put open bracket, then you close bracket. I hope you are listening, class. Right. We now need to find cos 150. So cos 150 is found using cos 30. Right. Right. So cos 150 is found using cos 30. But what you need to do is you just put a negative sign on 0.87. So you write minus 0.87. I want you to get something. If you have cos 60 being given cos 60 is half, and you want to calculate cos 120, because the 60 and 120 are supplementary angles which add up to 180. Similarly, 150 is a supplementary angle with 30. So cos 150 is found using cos 30. Cos 120 is found using cos 60. But for cos 120, you just put a negative sign on cos of 60. Same applies. Cos 30 is 0.87. So to find cos 150, put a negative sign first, then you write 0.87. I hope you are following. Right. If you want to find tan 150, you put a negative sign on tan 30, so it becomes 0.58. If you want to find cos 150, you use cos 30, but you put negative sign, so you write it as 0.87. But sign is the odd one out. Sin 150, you don't put a negative sign, you take 0.50 as it is. So negative sign is placed for cos and for tan, but sin, it remains plus. So sin is the odd one out. I hope you are listening, class. Right. So what I want you to do is you apply the BODMAS rule first. Start by simplifying this bracket before adding or subtracting. So 81 and 64, I'm going to paste and copy them. I want to multiply 144 with 0.87. So if you want to multiply 144 with 0.87, you start by ignoring the decimals. So you write 144 times 87 first. 0 is a placeholder. 8 times 4, you get 32. You write 2, carry 3. 8 times 4, you get 32 plus 3, it becomes 35. So you write 5, carry 3. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 3, you get 11. 7 times 4 is 28. So you write 8, carry 2. 7 times 4, 28 plus 2, 30. You write 0, carry 3. 7 times 1 is 7 plus 3, you get 10. So this is 8, 2, 5, 2, and 1. But remember, we have 2 decimal places on 0.87. So I'm going to put a comma between 5 and 2 so that I get 2 decimal places. So 144 times 0.87, you get 125.28. Right, but you say negative times negative, you get a plus. Then 144 times 0.87, we found 125.28. I hope you are listening, class. Right, so I am now adding all the numbers inside the square root. 81 is now written as 81,00, 64,00, 125,28. So here is 8, 0 plus 0 plus 2, you get 2. 1 plus 4, you get 5 plus 5 is 10. So it's 0, get 1. 8 plus 6, you get 14. Plus 2, it's 16. Plus 1, 17, carry 1. 1 plus 1, you get 2. So it simply means that AC is equals to square root of 270,28. And you leave it in set form. You get yourself the required marks. So this is how you do it when solving cosine rule in paper 1 without using a calculator.